This story begins at a lonely gas station in the middle of nowhere. The attendant is trying to pass the time quietly, but suddenly notices strange noises coming from outside. He goes out to investigate, knowing there's no food around to attract animals, and comes face to face with a dangerous presence that attacks him by surprise, leaving him with no way out. Meanwhile, in another part of the woods, a young couple, Seth and Polly, arrive at a remote spot, intending to camp for their anniversary. Although Polly is excited about sleeping under the stars and enjoying nature, things don't go as planned, because Seth turns out to be pretty clumsy at setting up the tent. Despite his efforts to follow the instructions to the letter, they end up snapping one of the tent poles, ruining their romantic outdoor plans. Realizing they can't spend the night there, Seth suggests going to a hotel, but Polly insists she wanted a more adventurous experience. Eventually, however, they accept that the tent is useless and decide to pack up and find a more comfortable place to stay, though Polly jokes that surely next time they'll actually manage to camp elsewhere. Near the highway, we see Dennis and Lacey, a couple in a desperate situation. Because their vehicle is broken down and the engine is completely shot, Dennis is anxious and in a hurry to get to Mexico, but he realizes his truck won't make it any further. They need to find other transportation immediately to keep making their escape. Their opportunity arises when they see Seth and Polly's SUV approaching. Lacey acts like she's in trouble to get them to stop. When the couple slows down to help, Dennis seizes a moment to pull a gun and forcibly take control of the situation. He orders them to clear the back seat so they can get in, although Lacey tries to calm him down by reminding him they agreed not to involve anyone else. Dennis insists it's the only way to reach their destination. They force Seth and Polly into the car, but a small problem arises when Dennis orders Seth to drive. The guy confesses he doesn't know how to drive a stick shift manual transmission, only an automatic. This angers Dennis, who decides Polly will be the driver while he sits in the back, with Seth keep a close eye on him. During the tense ride, Dennis takes their phones and wallets to prevent them from calling for help or being tracked. While checking their IDs, he discovers that Seth is a PhD student. Lacey gets interested and asks if he can prescribe medication, but Seth clarifies that his doctorate is in biology, the study of life, and not medicine, so he can't help them with prescriptions. The atmosphere inside the car feels very heavy. Dennis tries to maintain control, while Lacey behaves strangely and unstably because she's going to withdrawal, which worries her boyfriend. He promises her that once they reach Mexico, everything will be okay and she'll be able to relax. Suddenly, the journey comes to a violent halt when they run over something on the road, causing a tire to blow out. Dennis panics, thinking it's a trap, but upon realizing they actually hit something, he orders everyone out to fix the problem. While Polly and Dennis handle changing the damaged tire, Seth and Lacey go over to see what they hit. Lying on the asphalt is a strange creature with a deformed body covered in spines, but Lacey, in her altered state, begins to hallucinate and believe the animal is her dog, Ginger. She becomes very distressed and demands that Seth help. The animal, convinced it is suffering. Even though Seth can see, the creature is dead and looks totally unnatural. Meanwhile, Dennis tries to change the wheel as fast as possible, but when he grabs a damaged tire, he pricks his finger on one of the creature's spines. That was stuck in rubber. Although it hurts, he doesn't pay it much mind at the moment and keeps working to get everyone out of there. The situation turns critical when the creature on the road begins to move in an unnatural way. This terrifies Lacey, who ends up firing her gun at the ground. In a panic, Dennis runs to her to see what's wrong, and realizing something is very off with the seemingly dead animal, he forces everyone back into the car immediately to flee the scene. The group gets back on the road, their nerves on edge. Lacey insists the animal attacked her, though Dennis tries to calm her down and rationalize the situation, telling her it was just a forest animal and that her dog, Ginger, died a long time ago. However, the SUV starts failing shortly after, because the impact also damaged the radiator and the engine begins to overheat rapidly. They have no choice but to stop at the next gas station they find, which turns out to be the same one where the attack occurred. At the beginning of the story, Dennis orders Seth to fill the gas tank and tells Polly to accompany him into the store to buy engine coolant and food, while Lacey runs toward the bathroom because she feels sick. Dennis and Polly enter the store and realize it's empty, which seems strange, but Dennis focuses on getting what they need. Meanwhile, Lacey tries to open the bathroom door, which is locked. When she forces it open, she finds a scene of horror. The gas station attendant is lying on the floor. covered in a black substance and full of spines, writhing in pain. The man begs her to kill him to end his suffering. This causes Lacey to run out, terrified, screaming that there's a man with spikes. Dennis hears her screaming and goes to see what's happening, but Lacey is in a total panic and points toward a man, who is now standing up and coming toward her with jerky, aggressive movements. The creature attacks and chaos breaks out at the station. The group runs to take shelter inside the store, but in the confusion, Lacey doesn't make it inside in time. She is caught by the monster and trapped in the attack near the gas pumps. Dennis, Seth, and Polly manage to block the glass door, but they are left watching in horror through security cameras and windows. Dennis sees Lacey lying outside and notices her body moving. Driven by desperation and his love for her, he decides he has to go out and help her, believing she is still alive. Seth and Polly try to stop him, warning him of the danger. But Dennis insists he won't leave her there. He opens the door and steps out to drag Lacey inside. But as soon as he tries to move her, he realizes something is terribly wrong. Lacey's body reacts violently and attacks him, forcing Dennis to recoil. During the struggle, Lacey's arm gets caught in the door, while Seth and Polly help Dennis slam it shut. To keep the creature out, to their horror, the arm tears away from the body, but instead of lying still, the severed hand begins to move on its own with surprising speed, proving the infection has a life of its own. Seth, fascinated yet terrified from his biologist's perspective, watches the hand scuttle around, looking for something to attack. He realizes the creature acts like a parasite taking control of the flesh it infects. Now they are trapped inside the store, with a creature wearing Lacey's body outside, and an infected hand trying to attack them inside. Meanwhile, Dennis tries to process the loss of his girlfriend, and the fact that the thing out there is no longer the woman he loved. Seth observes the hand's behavior and notes that it seems to be consuming blood and seeking heat, behaving more like an aggressive mold or fungus than a normal animal. With the main entrance blocked and the threat waiting outside, the group desperately tries to find another escape route. They head to the back of the store looking for an exit, but run into a locked metal door, unable to find a key anywhere. They decide to try removing the hinges with a screwdriver, hoping this will allow them to flee into the woods and get away from this nightmare. As they work frantically, Dennis shares a bit about his thwarted plans to reach Mexico and start a new life, plans that now seem impossible after losing his partner. However, just as they manage to remove the door, they realize there's an additional security gate locked, with a padlock, blocking their way, once again foiling their attempt to escape. In that moment of tension, they see the lights of a patrol car approaching the station. A female police officer arrives at the scene, apparently tracking the stolen vehicle or responding to an alert. Dennis, knowing she's looking for him, tries to hide, but the officer quickly spots him and orders him to come out with his hands up. Seth and Polly, terrified not by the police but by what's on the roof, try to warn the woman that she is in grave danger and beg her to get back in her cruiser and call for backup. However, the officer thinks this is a standard kidnapping situation and assumes Dennis is forcing him to say that. Consequently, she ignores the warnings and holds her ground, aiming her weapon and demanding their surrender. The tragedy happens in seconds as the officer refuses to listen and moves in to take control. The creature, which had moved silently across the gas station roof, drops down on her. The attack is brutal and sudden. The officer is blindsided, and before Seth, Polly, and Dennis's horrified eyes, she is torn apart and dragged upward, her body severed in a gruesome manner. The creature, now with more living matter to absorb, takes the top half of the woman's body, dropping her radio and part of her equipment on the ground. Just out of the group's reach, this event confirms their worst fears. The thing outside is fast, lethal, and growing as it absorbs its victims. Back inside, panic threatens to overtake them, but Seth tries to keep a cool head, analyzes what they just witnessed. He explains that the creature doesn't act like a rabid animal, but rather like a simple organism, similar to mold or fungus, seeking to expand and consume nutrients to grow stronger. As they discuss what to do, they hear voices coming from the fallen officer's radio. Dispatches, asking for a report, which means someone knows she was there, but no one will come if they don't respond. Realizing that radio is their only connection to the outside world, and their best chance to call for major help, they devise a plan to retrieve it without fully leaving the store. The plan involves making a long hook by joining various objects and wire hangers found in the store to fish the radio from the cracked door. As they prepare the contraption, Dennis starts feeling intense pain in the finger he pricked earlier, looking at it. He notices the infection has advanced alarmingly. The finger has turned black and seems to twitch with involuntary spasms, as if it has a will of its own. Dennis tries to hide this from the others to avoid causing panic or being rejected. So he bandages his hand and joins the effort to retrieve the radio. They open the door very carefully, just enough to fit the makeshift hook through Seth and Polly, maneuver the wire with caution, trying to snag the radio line. A few yards away, the tension is unbearable. As any noise could attract the creature, they are about to succeed, managing to hook the device, and start dragging it toward them. But at the last second, the creature reappears. This time it is combined with the remains of the officer and other victims, forming a much more terrifying mass. The creature attacks the hook in the radio, destroying their only hope of communication, and forcing the group to slam the door shut to keep it out. In the struggle, the creature manages to damage the entrance, or leave parts of itself, trying to get in, proving its strength is increasing. The situation worsens drastically when Dennis's arm begins to react violently to the infection. He can no longer hide it. His hand twists into strange shapes and starts slamming against the shells of his own body, try to hurt him or take full control. Seth and Polly realize Dennis is being absorbed from the inside. The group takes refuge in the back near the freezers, looking for a safer spot. Sweating and in great pain, Dennis confesses to them that he pricked himself on the spine while changing the tire and can feel the infection traveling up his arm toward the rest of his body. They know that if the infection reaches his vital organs or brain, Dennis will turn to one of those things and kill them all in a moment of clarity and desperate bravery. Dennis asks them to cut off his arm to stop the parasites. Advanced, they have no surgical tools, only a box cutter from the store and a heavy concrete block. The scene is raw and intense. Seth and Polly have to act fast. They improvise a tourniquet to cut off blood flow, and with Dennis screaming in pain, Seth begins to cut through the infected flesh. However, the box cutter isn't enough to get through the bone. Amidst the desperation, and Dennis screaming for them to just finish it, they are forced to use a concrete block to shatter the bone with a brutal blow, finally separating the infected limb from Dennis's body after the traumatic amputation. Dennis is exhausted and on the verge of passing out, but alive and free from the parasite's influence for the moment. As he recovers and they bandage his stump, the ex-convict opens up the couple. He tells them the truth about why he was running. In a previous robbery, he shot a truck driver, and the guilt has been eating him alive ever since, not just for the act, but because the man's widow was left in financial ruin due to medical bills. His plan to go to Mexico wasn't just an escape. He was carrying stolen money, intended for the woman to try and make some amends for the damage he caused. This confession shifts how they view him. Seth and Polly stop, seeing him just as a criminal who kidnapped them, and begin to understand him as a repentant man. Try to do something good before the end. Meanwhile, Seth continues to analyze everything he's observed regarding the creature's behavior. He recalls the initial attack on the gas station attendant, and how when the creature attacked their SUV upon arrival, it seemed to ignore him for a moment, to lunge at the vehicle's hood. Connecting the dots, he formulates a crucial theory. The creature doesn't see or hear like we do. Instead, it is a thermal organism that hunts by detecting heat. This explains why it attacked the car's hot engine, and why it pursues people who are living heat sources. This conclusion gives Seth a risky but brilliant idea. If they can lower their body temperature enough, they might become invisible to the monster. Seth shares his dangerous theory with the group, convinced that the only way to fool the creature is to become invisible to it, which involves lowering his body temperature until it matches the ambient temperature. The plan calls for Seth to lock himself in the freezer, surrounded by bags of ice, until his body reaches a state near hypothermia. At that point, he will make a run for the police cruiser to call for help or find weapons, trusting that the monster won't be able to detect him if he isn't emitting heat. Although Polly is terrified by the idea that her boyfriend could freeze to death or suffer permanent damage, they accept it as their only real chance of survival and begin the process immediately. The atmosphere inside the store grows even more tense as Seth sits amidst the ice, shivering violently as his temperature gradually drops. Polly watches him closely, monitoring his temperature to ensure he doesn't cross the point of no return, while Dennis prepares as part of the plan, creating a loud, bright distraction at the back of the store to draw the monster away from the main entrance. The Wait is agonizing, with Seth fighting to stay conscious, as the cold numbs his limbs and clouds his mind, but he finally reaches a desired temperature, becoming a cold specter ready to step outside. When the moment arrives, Polly lights some fireworks found in the store and tosses them out the back door, creating a boom and flash that catch the creature's attention. Taking advantage of the confusion, Dennis opens the main door, and Seth dashes toward the cruiser, moving with difficulty due to his muscles being stiff from the cold. The biologist manages to reach the police vehicle without being attacked, confirming his theory was correct, and the creature couldn't see him. But his relief is short-lived when he realizes the keys aren't in the ignition, preventing him from starting the car, and escaping as they had hoped. The situation complicates quickly as the distraction fades and Seth's temperature begins to rise. From the physical exertion and stress, desperate, he searches the cruiser and finds a shotgun, but realizes he won't be able to make it back to the store without being detected, as his thermal camouflage is failing. Seeing his companion exposed and in danger, Dennis makes a brave decision. He exits the store armed with more fireworks or flares, screaming and waving his arms to draw the monster's attention to himself and give Seth a chance to return to the safety of the building. Chaos ensues as the creature, attracted by the new source of heat and movement, lunges at Dennis forcing him to retreat back inside the store, while Seth seizes a moment to run and join them, now armed with a police shotgun. However, amidst the confusion of the retreat and defensive maneuvers, the trail of fuel they had previously spilled in a failed attempt to burn the woods ignites, causing fire to spread rapidly toward the station. The group finds themselves cornered inside the store once again, but this time with the added danger of flames, threatening to burn everything down. The final battle begins inside the establishment, where the creature manages to breach the entrance, or parts of it begin to attack ferociously. Lacey's severed hand, still hiding in the shadows, attempts to attack again, but Polly reacts quickly and manages to throw it into the fire or destroy it. Fighting with a courage she didn't know she possessed, Seth uses a shotgun to keep the main entity at bay, firing to buy time. But they realize bullets aren't enough to kill an organism that functions as a colony of independent cells. They need something more drastic and definitive to end the threat. Dennis, already weak from the amputation and blood loss, realizes he has been reinfected and that his condition will prevent him from escaping quickly enough amidst the fire and destruction. He understands this is the end of the road for him, but he decides his death will not be in vain. The ex-convict looks at Seth and Polly, who have their whole lives ahead of them, and decides to sacrifice himself to ensure they make it out of that hell alive. Dennis hands Seth a key or a slip of paper with bank account information giving him urgent instructions to find the wife of the man he killed years ago and give her all the money in the account, fulfilling his final wish for redemption. With the fire surrounding them and the creature closing in, Dennis pushes a couple toward the rear exit, ordering them to run and not look back. Seth and Polly, heartbroken but understanding there is no other option, obey and flee into the woods, distancing themselves from the gas station as fast as they can. Dennis remains alone before the monster, facing the nightmare, head on without fear. He waits for the precise moment. The creature lunges at him, and with final gesture of defiance, shoots the propane tanks and gas pumps. This triggers a massive explosion that swallows the entire station, burning the parasite and ending his own life. In a fiery instant, Seth and Polly stop, at a safe distance. They are exhausted, injured, and traumatized, but alive thanks to the sacrifice of a man who began as their captor and ended as their savior.